Policy lags technology. Who'd have thunk? How about that? Matt Gentile. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Gentile, that's good.
Gentile. Deloitte. Deloitte spends a lot of time helping customers gain insight, gain wisdom, take good action. Matt, tell us what you can about this problem.
I'm not sure. After this morning, I thought I knew what I wanted to say, and then now I'm sort of thoroughly confused about it. How do I get out of here? There it is. So I'm a little bit of a literal guy, and I read the paragraph that sort of set up this panel. It says government agencies and the repositories that they hold in vast amount of data, much of it tied to a location or an individual or both, that this information is really the foundation for creating our location-enabled society, but sharing between government agencies has always been a challenge, and we're sort of riff on that a little bit. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not sure I actually agree with the premise and the assumption that the data that's held in the government repositories actually forms the foundation of location-enabled society. I think, as I'll try and explain, that the exponential growth in the creation of what I call, or what we call, location-enabled or location-based digital exhaust from devices and sensors. Just pause for a second. I think there were close to 150 or 200 million smartphones sold last quarter, and not to mention the likes of Garmin and embedding GPS in watches and so forth. That is the aspect of our lives that's really enabling our location-enabled society. And that what geospatial technology does, in part from being the physical pieces that tell us the location, is it translates this exhaust into insights, and it can do it very, very, very fast, and it doesn't wait for policy, many instances. And if you take it to an extreme, that the exhaust offers the potential to essentially parallel construct much of what is held in government repositories. So if we spend too much time thinking too long and hard about it, as policymakers, people will find alternative methods to start deriving some of these answers that we seek that are location-based. The other thing that sort of comes into the focus here is that the maps themselves, I think, have emerged as this living platform for shared information, crowdsourcing, decision-making, real-time analysis, that maps are the dashboard. In our business, we have a lot of clients that buy into business intelligence technology in order to get executive dashboards and reports, and they want to see the pie charts and bar graphs and all that. And increasingly, it's about where stuff is happening. So the premise that the maps are the dashboard. And that concerns around licensing and intellectual property, which we've touched on briefly this morning, seem dwarfed by the fear, uncertainty, and doubt over the P word, privacy. But part of my premise is that much of that horse is already out of the barn, maybe not entirely, but much of it certainly is. And to take, I think, what Sarah was proposing and bring it into what we did as a study at Deloitte is look at the good and positive ways that a lot of this digital exhaust, a lot of the other location-based or location-enabled data that we're finding ourselves awash in these days are used for good. And our study, which we called The Power of Zoom, looks at the convergence of disruptive geospatial technology and highlights examples of how this transforms government. So to take a page out of a book from the Sensible City Lab and my alma mater, MIT, when we went to talk to government policymakers about how fast things are changing and how much the technology is really pushing this landscape, this was a great example that I used to sort of explain that the technology is so small and so cheap that we've even come to throw it away on purpose. And in fact, in this case, the idea was to tag a bunch of trash, throw it away, and then see where it went, what happens to it. And for many executives, both in government and in the private sector, they think in terms of supply chains. In this case, they were looking at a removal chain. And there were some really interesting insights that came out of this study. For instance, some things traveled 3,000 miles after you threw it away. And boy, that seems like, what's the carbon footprint of that? And, we're really trying to recycle. Some good things came out of it, though, which was that much of the material they found actually made its way into the recycling stream and reclamation. But, I think the impactful notion for a lot of the people that we started to talk to is that the technology is so small and so cheap, we're literally at the point where we can throw it away for experimentation. The other thing that I think is important about this is that, in more than understanding the technology and helping the policymakers come to grips with this, is understanding really what's at stake in the business arena. And I think one area where this is highlighted is the value of location data from the perspective of some of the major technology players. And there really is sort of this, I sort of call it the arms race between Google and Apple, dueling patents and protection. But what's at stake here, I think, is highlighted here in this quote, and it captures the value of location data, and that the mobile map is the search engine landing page for anyone not at a desk. And really increasingly, the search activity is taking place in the context of a map. So tying all of this together, location intelligence is, in the acceleration of that in these three forces, ubiquitous digital exhaust, rapidly changing technology, and having maps as the platform, we came up with this idea of the power of Zoom with three basic principles about seeing the big picture, finding common focus, and creating a new frame. And I'll just highlight two very quickly because I know we're here short on time. I think many here agree that maps are really a sexy visualization tool, but I think the hard work and the value that comes out of geospatial is really statistical and mathematical, and the modeling that happens as a result. The quote here was from an interview we did with Brett Goldstein in Chicago, and he's really pioneering the way policymakers use the predictive power of place to address crime in Chicago. And what came out of this, and the takeaway was that place is really a convergence of measurable factors. He used this term coefficient of behaviors. And when you analyze it mathematically, you can really understand the complex yet surprisingly stable patterns of behavior. And the takeaway for me is that the new movement in geospatial analysis is really behavior-led and not boundary-led. Thinking less in terms of what happens in a particular census tract or shading a thematic map of a county. It's much more driven by behavior. And because of this enablement and what we're getting out of increasing volumes of location data, we look at things more seamlessly across space. But I really think that it's not enough to know when and where something is likely to happen, but it's more important to think about what you'll do about it. And I've heard Clay Shirky talk about this concept of cognitive surplus, and that is what we do in our free time could really make a difference in society. And I think the work that's been done in OpenStreetMap over a long period of time, but specifically in spurts, particularly around Haiti, is a great example of that. It really sets a new tone for how people can respond to disasters, and the value that's created in this instance was obvious in that there's a new, very detailed base map for Haiti, which came in very, very valuable. But I also look to how fast things are sort of evolving, and I see Sandy as sort of the second evolution of this, and it sort of came in three ways. One is sort of the microtasking and using the crowd, the analysis of thousands and thousands of Civil Air Patrol collected imagery for New York and New Jersey coastline. It was, I spent hours personally going through this imagery because I couldn't get there, but I felt like I really wanted to help. You know, it was fun and amazing how much time went by as I started to click through these images. But I think the second wave was, you know, FEMA getting their arms around using satellite and aerial imagery to accelerate the assessment, but also the release of funding to people that needed it most. And then third, which I probably found the most interesting, the FCC, in partnership with the cell carriers, implemented the Wireless Emergency Alert Program. Using location-based data from carriers, the government was able to send emergency notifications to evacuate, mandatory evacuation. There were many people who, in fact, almost virtually everyone who got this notification had no idea how it got on their phone, where it came from, but they got the notification. And to me, the bottom line is that geospatial technology, these platforms enabled distributed response, not just to the disasters, but to a lot of different public sector challenges that we have today, and allows governments to better coordinate across agencies and across programs. So I'll get to the P word. I'm an avid cyclist and triathlete, and I've been taking full advantage of this convergence that we've been talking about. And you know, I really don't go for a workout of any type without some kind of GPS device strapped somewhere on my bike or my wrist or something. And the Strava platform allows me to analyze my data 6 ways to Sunday, which I'm kind of a data geek and I like to do that, but it also allows me to compare my performance to friends and even to strangers who have traversed the same routes that I have. And it has some really clever concepts for addressing concerns over privacy, and I think it's just a little tiny glimpse into how the very technology that creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt can be, in fact, used as a small tool to help protect privacy as well. So just to close out, you know, the power of Zoom to me is about government tackling the wealth of location data and geospatial technology in an organized way and using these emergent capabilities to make smarter decisions. But more than the capabilities, I think the impact of geospatial on policymaking comes in two big sort of impactful points. One is it enables distributed problem solving. We can enlist the power of the crowd and people who are in far remote areas to help. And it helps us understand things more on a behavioral level cross-border than we have traditionally looked at it. That's it.
Thank you, Matt Gentile.